thanks for tuning in. I'm Tracy Palazzo-Barnes, and I have the lovely Mr. Andrew Barnes with me on air today.
Lovely, that's me.
Now, at time of recording, we've been holed up under the same roof for over 4 weeks, and inexplicably, we've come up with the idea for today's podcast.
Yeah, inexplicably. Yeah, today, we're thinking about stress and anxiety. Funny that. Though you're widely known for your sort of pain-relieving therapies, this is a subject you've studied widely and used on many clients over the years, hasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And also it's a subject you know something about, isn't it? In fact, when we were first together, I learned all the bodywork stuff, and you actually studied hypnotherapy and NLP.
Yes, I did. And stress and anxiety often came up when we were discussing clients' problems to plan hypnotherapy sessions. Trying to treat their behaviours and thinking behind the anxiety was a regular issue. And I know that you do that too, but you've got some other extra insight.
I think you're talking about its socio-physio-psychological nature.
That's easy for you to say.
I wish it was. Anyone who knows me knows that I am fascinated by the interconnectedness of everything. So my studies into stress have uncovered loads of research on the social, physiological and psychological nature of stress and anxiety. I just always feel that in order to solve a problem, understanding what it is and how it works really, really helps. And yeah, I was a child that used to take my toys apart when I was little. I just don't feel it's quite enough to refer to stress or anxiety as a thing that has a standard solution. You know, there's 7 billion people out there and none of them are identical.
So your approach is a tailored solution? How are you going to do that for 7 million people? Billion even.
Yeah, I think I got that wrong too. Yeah, either way, they're huge numbers. And you're right, there has to be some general information that can be accessed by large amounts of people, because stress is a big problem in this day and age. But I guess what I'm really keen to share is the mechanics of stress, plus some examples of how it can manifest in different ways, and maybe a range of solutions under different circumstances.
Right.
If you're really going to tie me down...
You were missing.
Okay, if you're going to make me define exactly what my approach is, I guess it's that I would like to help people objectify their stress in order to take control of it, rather than them thinking that somehow they are personally defective.
So you're talking about taking the guilt out of stress and anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. By understanding that it's a physiological problem, much the same as a pulled muscle or, indigestion, for example, then it becomes easier to find a personal solution. Not everyone benefits from the same solution to indigestion, and the same will be true of stress. But having an idea of what's happening and why makes it much easier to change the processes that are taking place.
Okay, but let's look at some specific examples. We've been asking people what the words stress and anxiety mean to them over the past few days, and we've got some quite interesting responses. Do you want to talk about those?
Yeah, especially since that's the main basis for today's podcast.
Smarty. It's my job to keep you on track, though, isn't it?
It certainly is. I have to say before we start that Chris, and you know who you are, said wife in response to what does stress mean to you. Now, I happen to know Chris's wife, and I can't believe she's anything other than a paragon of virtue. But then again, I think the same about myself, and I think you would say there's sometimes stress in our household. So.
I'm not falling into that trap.
Foiled.
So, it's quite a long list, and a majority of them are the phrases you would expect. But there are some that stand out, and there's a couple there that are very interesting. Stress can be quite a good thing, or stress can be a motivator. There's even one that says stress can be catalyst for a positive change. What do you think about these perspectives?
Okay, so yeah, thanks for that. actually, though, that's quite right. If we delve into the mechanics of stress and the stress response, we can see that what it does is it initiates the sympathetic nervous system.
Does it?
Yes. Okay, very quick anatomy lesson. The autonomic nervous system is the part of our nervous system that deals with all the involuntary reactions and processes that go on without our really noticing.
Yeah.
The autonomic nervous system is further broken down into sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear all the processes we need for action. It's essentially our fight or flight mechanism.
Okay, so
this is really useful when you need to spring into action, whether that's to take yourself out for a run, work manically to hit a deadline, or run away from a tiger.
Oh, tigers, yeah, there were a lot of them in Reading.
Well, this is true, but it does lead me quite neatly onto my next point.
Which is
that the sympathetic nervous system increases some processes and releases certain chemicals that enable us to either run away from danger or stand and fight it. In the case of the hundreds of tigers currently roaming Reading's streets, it's generally quite a short-lived process. Either you run fast enough to get away or you don't. Either way, the problem is resolved quite quickly.
Okay, tigers aside, I'm guessing there is a more mundane point to this.
Well, yeah, okay. So what if all those tigers have different names? You know, like racing horses do.
Race horses, yeah.
Yeah, you know, things like, here's number 2, I'm worried about my job, or here's number 3, my wife doesn't love me anymore, or how am I going to pay the gas bill?
Okay, so, interesting. So, instead of being chased by tigers, you're saying that people are constantly harassed by problems, and these problems have the same effect as being chased by a tiger.
Yeah, obviously not in such a life or death manner, but yes, these types of worries and fears have exactly the same effect on the body, initiation of the sympathetic nervous system. Only the solution rarely presents itself quickly, so we can remain in a fight or flight state for much longer than we should.
Okay, so you mentioned the other system.
Yes, so the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the state we need to be in for all non-life-threatening situations, such as digesting our food, cell renewal, reproductive and immune function, sleep, yada yada yada.
Yeah. So these two systems sort of complement each other and maintain a balance?
Yeah, but we can never be in both at the same time. We're either in fight or flight or in rest and recuperation. So while a certain amount of short-lived stress is good in terms of getting us to take action, because obviously we need to move around and we need to have a purpose in life, and that is the state that those people who feel stress is a good thing are referring to.
So they're right, some stress is good for you.
Yeah, short-lived periods of stress certainly makes us take action, but prolonged periods of heightened stress response is very damaging to our health. And that is the state that lots of other people have commented on. For example, looking at some here, we've got unable to function normally, somebody else said under pressure, and somebody else here says too much to do and struggling to cope.
Right, so why does a process that's designed to make us take positive action eventually leave us feeling like this?
So the sympathetic nervous system suppresses the function of the parasympathetic nervous system and vice versa. We can't stay in sympathetic for extended periods of time. So when we can no longer sustain it, we are forced back into parasympathetic mode, which immediately takes us back into rest and relaxation. But we have a tendency to fight it because we're determined to push ourselves through it. So instead of returning us to calm, we feel fatigued, confused and emotional.
Right. I've heard you talk a lot about chemical imbalances when you've been talking about this, and can you tell me how this fits in?
Okay, so when the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, several chemicals are released, one of which is cortisol. And when there's very frequent unresolved stress, the levels of cortisol remain high even quite some time after the event has occurred. And this can cause much more serious health problems.
Such as?
Yeah, so high levels of cortisol are linked to problems with mental acuity, anything from loss of concentration to dementia. Also, anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia. It can cause metabolic changes, high blood pressure, and even insulin resistance.
Right. So I know you don't like one-size-fits-all solutions, but is there one thing that you could say to anyone who knows they're under long-term stress and wants to start making a difference right away?
Yes, actually. And really, as a society, we have to stop this fetish we have for pushing ourselves to the limit all the time. By all means, push yourself to achieve, that's good for your mental health. But you must intersperse periods of activity with periods of rest and recuperation. And to underline that, when I say rest and recuperation, I mean resting the mind and thoughts as well as the body. And actually, for those who are worried about progress or being productive, frequent breaks will enable you to do more and be more effective than when you push yourself through fatigue and lethargy.
Okay. Right, so returning to the more common reactions we had to the words stress and anxiety, some of the comments we received were quite emotive and highly descriptive, like manic and unable to focus or agitated. What would help people who are feeling like this?
So obviously it's a very personal thing, but these people are describing feelings of extreme stress and anxiety. Anxiety can be both response and catalyst, incidentally, and so that can become a bit of a loop. So the first thing to do when you're feeling like you're describing is to break the cycle. As soon as you feel yourself experiencing these sorts of extreme emotions, you really need to stop what you're doing as soon as it's safe to do so. So obviously if you're on a tightrope or driving down the road, that's not safe to do so. But as soon as it's safe to stop what you're doing, then take yourself away from whatever the situation was and make yourself do something else. Which could be anything from tidying out a drawer, taking a bath, or maybe going for a walk. But whatever it is, it needs to be something that occupies your thoughts as well as your body. So body and mind have a complete break from whatever the stressor was. Small point here, water is also really vital at times like this, because although it's little talked about, stress causes dehydration, and dehydration causes stress. So that's a nice little loop to get into. If you're feeling under stress, always reach for a glass of water first, even if you don't fancy it. Also, this type of heightened stress can cause sugar cravings, which in turn increases the stress response, which causes more sugar cravings. So again, if you reach for something sweet in times like this, be prepared that you're going to have to find some willpower to stop.
I could do with that, yeah.
The same goes for alcohol and nicotine, I'm afraid, as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's always better to leave things like that when you're a little calmer, because reaching for a crutch at times of stress just reinforces the need for the crutch. I've seen this so many times.
Yeah, I've had that T-shirt a few times myself. But I like your crutch analogy because actually, crutch.
Yeah, thank you.
Because actually, people who are feeling trapped are also more kind of in fight mode than flight mode. But generally, it's a hopeless fight, and therefore much better to walk away and do something else. Whatever the situation is, it can always be revisited with a calmer mind and body once there's been a brief period of reset.
Yeah.
Interestingly, also there were other comments from people that indicated that they had an inherent tendency to do just that. A couple of people here. One lady said stress was about wanting to escape to think, and somebody else said that it meant needing to take a break. So these are great examples of making really positive use of the flight mode, and is much more in tune with exactly what needs to be done.
So it's far more natural then.
It's just a bit more in tune. It's not going out of control.
Okay.
And if I can mention tigers again,
What's it with you and tigers?
I like tigers. It's much better to take flight than take on a fight that's just going to weigh you down.
Okay. And what about those people who feel stressed when they're not in control? We had a couple of comments there about inability to control thoughts or responsibilities beyond my control, not enough time, things like that.
Yes, so this leads me rather neatly onto one of my favourite stress and anxiety busting exercises. I've used it lots and lots over the years.
Go on.
And we've all had a healthy reminder of it recently. And what I am talking about is identifying and accepting those things we can and can't control.
Okay.
I use the Serenity Prayer, as you know, a lot.
Oh yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
I've used it in worksheets, in planners, and I've often used it when tapping.
So just for clarity, for anyone who doesn't use it, it's grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That made me sound really clever, didn't it?
Yeah, so there is another verse I use as well, but just that verse on its own covers just about everything you need to focus on. How many of us worry about things that we have absolutely no control over, or things that haven't yet happened yet, or actually, often even worse, things that have already happened that we just can't change?
Yeah, I've got that t-shirt.
Really, the only thing we ever have any control over is our own actions, to the actions and reactions to the circumstances we find ourselves in. Once we have that clarity, we also have the ability to plan a way towards a different tomorrow.
Oh, I like that idea. Did you say you were going to put some helpful worksheets or something on your website?
Yes, nice heads up there, Mr. Barnes. There's also some meditations and ebooks, and if anyone signs up to the mailing list, I can let them know when new stuff is added, because I'm adding stuff all the time, as you know.
Yeah, and I know how happy you are to answer any questions people might email over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's contact links on the website for that too. But right now, I think after all we've said, perhaps it's time to wrap this up and for us to go and have a little R&R.
Oh, good. I'll go and make the tea. Bye-bye for now.
See you next time. Bye.